Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk, here in the lowlands of Scotland, south of Edinburgh, which, of course, we all know is the capital of the universe and everything in it, basically. But we all know that. So, welcome, everybody. Hope you've all had a good week. For those of you that we're not at Songwriting Simplified on Wednesday, I hope you've had a fantastic week. For those of you that were, I hope you've had a fantastic few days since I last spoke to you. Welcome, everybody. We don't have many people here yet, but hopefully we will do. We have 11 people here so far. So it'd be great if we get a few more people in here. But Billy Morgan was first in the door, being absurdly early. He was here like about 5 hours early, which is extremely impressive, and I don't think it will be beaten, to be honest. But who knows? It might. We'll see. So we got Billy, as I said, and we got Paul Morgan, who was literally just about 5 minutes behind him. And then we've got Mike Johnson, who is also here, and Kyle Draduziak, who's on vacation, but here, that's just true dedication. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Kyle. And we got John Hawk here, and we got Dave Barcelo and Danny Taylor, and we've got Keith at Radio Tuck Frumpet, and we got Tony Cardona, and that is everybody who has said hello in the chat so far. We got 14 people now, so people are starting to come in the door, which is awesome. We got 5 likes. It'd be awesome if you guys could just all hit the like button. Everybody who is watching now, hit that like button. It would help me out immeasurably if you do. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, select all notifications. That way you don't miss a thing of anything that I'm going to be doing over the course of 2023. And there's going to be quite a bit of content coming. I'm working on a Notion series where we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into Notion Mobile, which is awesome. Although it's, it says mobile, so it's kind of aimed at kind of iOS, iPads, Android devices, and those kind of things. It's not just for mobile devices. It works on PC and Mac as well. And there is a cool feature inside of Notion Mobile that allows you to send not only to Studio One from Notion on your iPad or on your phone, but also to send to Notion Mobile on any of the devices that you have on your network. It's a part of the in-app feature bundle which you can purchase in-app, or if you're a member of Persona Sphere, you can just sign in with your Sphere credentials and that feature will be unlocked for you. And it's awesome. It instantly sends the document. It's not like you have to send it and then open it. It sends it and opens it instantly. It's really, really cool. Very handy feature. It means that I can be working on the move, like when I go on vacation, which I will be doing in July. I'll be taking my iPad Pro with me, and I'm going to be working on some horn charts, which I know that when I get back, I can send them directly to Studio One, and I can put the correct kind of horn sounds that I want, like the Chris Hine horns, for example, on those sounds, and then I can send not only the notation but the Studio One song to the guys that are going to be playing the real instruments for that particular recording session. So that's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to diving into that series a bit. I know that not everybody in my subscriber list reads notation. That's okay. If you don't read notation, this is still going to be very cool for you, because if you work in Studio One, you can send MIDI data from Studio One to Notion, and then you can give the chart to somebody that does read music, and that way your ideas are still performable by somebody that does read notation. So either way, from whichever perspective you are, don't discount Notion, because it is very powerful. Whether you are a notation reader or not, it doesn't really actually matter too terribly much. It's really, really handy. All right, so now that I've kind of talked about that for a wee bit, and Old School Funk and Soul has just popped in the room as well, which is cool. Glad to see you. Sorry, folks, I have a little bit of phlegm and catarrh at the moment, but we will get through it. All right, so What is tonight's show all about? Well, tonight it's Sunday Night Live, which means it is your Studio One questions. That's the priority for tonight. Studio One, recording, mixing, mastering, those kind of things is what we're gonna talk about. And I've got an example of a cool little mixing technique which I have done before on my Mixing with Jonny series, where I mixed Paper Deity, my song from my 2016 EP Belonging to Tomorrow, and it was like 10 videos or so where we mixed and then we mastered the song, and so this technique is very, very cool, and it means that you can use quite a lot of reverb, but you can also maintain the clarity of the vocal while still having all of that nice reverb that you want. So it's very cool. It's kind of a sidechaining technique, but you're actually sidechaining the reverb is what you're doing. You're compressing the reverb, and it's very handy. And some of you will know about this, some of you won't. So for those of you that won't, you'll get to see how easy this is in Studio One to set up. All right, we will get through this with my guitar. It's cool. Unfortunately, it's not a Stratocaster or a Telecaster, but it's just classic flame guitar. All right, so let's get into this. Let's go over to Studio One, and I'm going to get the correct song open. And here we go. All right, so I've got this little vocal that I knocked up. I'm not really singing, I'm just talking into the microphone, but I'm going to show you how this works. First of all, I'm going to show you the end result, then I'm going to show you how you set this up. So, listen to this. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So, alright, so there we go. It's pretty swamped with reverb. Which is cool, and in some cases, particularly something like a big power ballad, you want a good amount of reverb. So what do we do if we want to maintain our clarity while still having this nice swampy reverb? Well, what you want to do is you want to put a compressor on your effects channel or your effects bus, whichever way you're going to do it. I've gone for the old standard effects channel. The reason why I've done that is that some of you are not using Studio One 6, some of you are using Studio One 5 or 4, or some are even using Studio One 3 still. So this is accessible to you guys because you will have the old effects channels without the sends. Whereas this is new for Studio One 6. This is very cool. But that's a subject for another video. So what you need to do is you need to put on a compressor. Let's go and open this guy up. And you dial it in. And then you set up the sidechain. So if I click on this little arrow here, and I've set the send to pre-fader, and I've selected the vocal channel. It's basically the only channel I can select. And it's just that simple. And so now what's happening is every time there is audio signal on the vocal channel, the compressor that is on the room reverb channel here is going to compress the reverb. And then it's going to get out of the way and allow the tail of the reverb through. So it should sound like this. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity. So I'm still getting the nice swampy effect of the big reverb, but you can still actually hear the voice. It's not getting totally swamped out. So if I bypass the compressor. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here, way too much. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here. Now, I'm kind of exaggerating it a bit. I probably wouldn't do nearly that much compression. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb. There, maybe about 6 or 7 dB worth of compression. You can do more or you can do less if you want. It's kind of, this is a taste thing. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to play with the attack and release time, so that you are getting the vocal, the clarity that you want, plus also you're getting the tail through. So if I was to set this to the fastest attack time, this is what you would get. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb. So basically it is squashing the reverb instantly in like extremely fast time, 0.1 milliseconds. So it's very, very quick. So what we're going to do, and that might be too quick for you. And then I've got a relatively lengthy release time. So if I set this to the fastest release time, so what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to, it kind of sounds a bit pumpy and a bit weird. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain. If I set the attack time too long, then basically reverb is going to come back through without really compression being applied. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression. The secret here is to find that happy balance between the reverb being grabbed, but not being grabbed too quickly so that it sounds artificial. So it sounds like it's being compressed. That's what you want to avoid. You want this to be more felt than heard. You don't want to actually hear the compression being applied to the reverb. You want to just basically get the effect of plenty of reverb, but plenty of clarity of the voice. So you're going to have to play with the attack and release times and the ratio as well. You want to make sure this ratio is not too heavy. If you have this up too much, it will. So what we're going to do with this sound very, very grabby. So if I even like really exaggerate this. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here. Now that sounds really artificial to my ears anyway. So I would set this maybe, round about 2. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So have a play with this as an idea so that you get the vocal coming through nice and clearly, but you also get the reverb tail that you want as well. So play with the attack and release until you find that happy balance that you want. And then use the threshold and the ratio to find, kind of the amount of compression that you want. I would say don't push it much more than about 6 to 9 dB of gain reduction. Any more than that, and it's going to start to sound, to me anyway, it's going to start to sound a little bit artificial. And you'll start getting the reverb being completely squashed and then coming back in. And that to me is not very natural. You want to find that balance point between clarity and the reverb tail, so that you're getting the reverb that you want, but it's not swamping the vocal. So that is tonight's little Studio One mixing tip. I've got a few of these that I've thought about, these are things that I haven't really revisited in a few years. So these are kind of things that I've done in previous videos that I maybe did about 5 or 6 years ago. And actually some of my opinions on doing these things has changed quite a bit. For example, I'm going to do a bunch of things on EQ. And my opinion on EQ has changed quite a bit. I used to be of the opinion, and I held this opinion for quite a long time actually, maybe from about 2001 onwards, until maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And the opinion that I had of EQ was this. Basically, you high pass everything up to about 100 hertz, except if it's a bass instrument or if it's a kick drum. Those you don't really high pass filter that much. Maybe, kind of you get rid of the low lows, like, 30 hertz and below. But otherwise, you high pass everything up to about 100 hertz. I held that opinion for a very long time, and I made videos on it and I argued for it. However, my opinion has changed quite a bit. I still very much believe in high pass filtering. However, I think going up to 100 is kind of a little bit bizarre. Saying everything should be high passed up to 100 unless it's a low pitched instrument or a kick drum just seems to me to be a little bit kind of artificial. What you end up with is you can end up with mixes that are too thin because you've actually high passed too much away. High pass filtering is a good thing, and it's actually a necessary thing to get to clean up the low end and create a nice, tight, punchy low end for your mix. But you don't want to kind of like just arbitrarily hit everything to 100 hertz. That's going to end up with a mix that has no body, no girth. And your mix needs to be nice and well rounded. Now, I understand the principle of this EQ concept, which is you want to get everything out of the way of the kick drum and the bass guitar. You want those to come through, or the upright bass, the low instruments and the percussive low end. You want those things to not be robbed from by everything else or clouded by everything else. You want those to come through nice and clearly, nice and strong, particularly if what you're mixing is rock music. If you're mixing jazz, this whole argument is pretty much null and void. It's not necessary because actually the bass is going to be playing quarter notes in a jazz piece, and the kick drum is going to be feathered very lightly with the beater along with the kick drum, along with the bass the upright bass or bass guitar on the quarter notes. So it's different, and so you don't have that problem. You're not going to have that battle so much in jazz or in folk music that you will have with rock music, to make sure that the low end is tight and punchy, and there's room for everything else. You haven't got so much low end that the highs are not able to come through. And that's the whole thing of high pass filtering. That's why it's there. It's there to enable the lows to be nice and tight and punchy, but also for the highs to be able to come through without being completely swamped by the amount of energy of the low end that's in your mix. So my opinion on that has changed quite a bit. So I still high pass filter, but I'm not going to high pass filter arbitrarily up to 100 hertz. It might be 80, it might be 70, it might be 150. It's going to depend much more upon what I require from the music as a whole, and also from the instruments and the sound that I want from those instruments and the way they were recorded. So that's kind of a big thing that's changed for me in the last maybe 3 or 4 years. So there you go. I hope that this little tip here with sidechain compression on the room reverb to duck the reverb. You can do the same thing with delays as well. You can duck them out of the way so that the repeats of the delay don't get in the way of the vocal. And actually, that's, for me, is where I'm going to use this particular trick the most, is with delays. Reverbs, yeah, I will make it maybe a little bit more subtle than I have done here, but with delays, I will do this much more aggressively because I don't want the repeats of the delays to start, funneling back into the vocal and start to trip up the vocal, and you get repeats of words with sung words kind of getting enmeshed together. So I would definitely use this sidechain trick on delays for a vocal much more than I will for reverbs. Reverbs, yeah, okay. But you can also, you can also help yourself, which is what I've done here with some EQ on the reverb. Roll off the low ends of the reverb so that you're getting the low end of the reverb from the vocal out of the way. Now, I have not EQ'd this vocal track, so there would be a little bit of high pass filtering. Kind of depends. This is out of context, but if this were in context with other instruments, I would definitely have some EQ and some compression here, maybe even a bit of limiting depending upon the style of music. But also I will EQ the lows off and some of the highs off of a reverb so that the reverbs don't start to build up mud, especially if we're doing sends and we're sending multiple different channels to the same reverb. If you're doing that and you're sending to the same reverb and there's no EQ on that reverb, you're going to start getting low end building up in the reverbs, and then you'll start going to your channels and you'll start trying to high pass and EQ all of that stuff out of your channels, and it won't work because it's not the channels that's the problem. It's the reverbs that's the problem, or the delays that's the problem. So this is a standard thing that I do, is I high pass filter my reverbs so that there is not much low end. I will go as aggressive as, almost 300 hertz. And then on high end, I'll take away as much as, 10K and above. Now, there are certain circumstances where I won't low pass because I want the reverb to be nice and bright. So I won't use the high cut. I'll just use the low cut. But definitely low cut your reverbs and low cut your delays. High pass, low cut, same thing. But definitely do that for both. And you can change the, how aggressive you want that to be as well. And this is all going to help, as I will demonstrate for you. If I take that off. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here. Now, all that low end is kind of present in the vocal as well, because there's no EQ here. But it's also in the reverb. So if I now high pass the reverb. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is, and already you've got some clarity to that reverb, even without this sidechain. If I get rid of the sidechain compression. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of. So yes, the reverb is now a little bit thin, maybe a little bit too thin. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain. All right, so there's a bunch of tips for you for sidechaining and high passing your reverbs. I hope that helps. Tony says, what happens if you just use the adaptive setting on the compressor? So let's go back to the compressor and let's hit the adaptive and let's see what happens. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain. Now this adaptive button here is adaptive detection speed. So I don't think these settings are being applied when you have the adaptive mode on. As you can see, there's a lot more reduction going on. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of. Yeah, it's actually ducking. It's actually ducking a lot more of the reverb away. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression. But to me, it sounds a little bit pumpy. It sounds like the reverb is pumping a wee bit. So if you're going to use the adaptive detections, then, kind of, again, play around with the attack and release. There you go. Good question, though. Let's go back over here. There we go. Who else is here? I see that Rich Cresswell is here, and also Louis, my sponsor from Alps Media LLC, is here. Louis is awesome. Everybody, go say hi to Louis. And I should say at this point that if you are requiring PreSonus gear, or you are considering, maybe becoming a member of PreSonus Sphere, or this is your first experience of seeing Studio One in action and you're interested, go hit up Louis at Alps Media LLC and he'll hook you up with PreSonus Sphere memberships. He'll hook you up with Studio One 6 Professional. He'll also hook you up with Studio One 6 Artist if that's more of your bag, that you maybe don't need everything in Studio One, but you need enough to be able to get started in making music. He can hit you up. He can get you squared away with that as well. Also, he does do a cool little line of interfaces and stuff as well. So he will get you an awesome deal if you're in the United States, and I think maybe Canada as well, but I'm not sure about Canada. But certainly in the United States. Now, Mark at Old School Funk and Soul is asking me to set up the sidechain again. Yeah, I can do that. I can set that up from scratch. So let's go and remove the sidechain altogether. So it's gone. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the compressor and we're going to bung it on our channel here. And then what you do is you come up to the top here and you click on this guy, the sources button. And then in the send section here, you just give it a check mark. And then I'm going to set this to pre-fader. You don't have to set this to pre-fader if you don't want to, but if you're doing for sidechain purposes, I would recommend you do this, because it means that you can adjust this fader level, and 0 dB pre-fader send will get sent to the compressor here. And so basically what that means is it doesn't matter what the fader level is for mixing, you'll always get a full level signal going through that compressor. And it will make a big difference. Because it's not affected by the fader. You can set that to whatever you want when you're balancing the vocal against anything else. So I would recommend using a pre-fader send, personally. And I've also got this other send going to it here as well. All right, so watch this. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So what we're going to do with this vocal track, now that's pumping like absolute crazy. It's a little bit insane. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is that's we are going to apply a whole ton. That's with the attack set as fast as possible. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. All right, so the balance, it's easy. It's much easier. It's much easier to get what you want. What was I going to say here? I was distracted by reading something in the chat. So you can use this adaptive thing here. But I would say set your attack and release with everything a little bit exaggerated, and then dial back your threshold. And I would not advise going much over 6 dB. really, to be honest. So let's take a look at what I've got here. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use... Alright? So there you go. I hope that Tony is complaining about being ignored. But I answered your question, Tony. You said, what happens if you just use the adaptive setting on the compressor? I actually demonstrated that for you earlier. So, I'm sorry, Tony. I'm not quite sure what you mean by being ignored, because I did actually answer your question with regard to the adaptive setting. And I even showed it there as well. So let's have a look at that again. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So if you click on the adaptive here, so what we're going to do with this vocal track here is absolutely slamming the reverb. So I would maybe adjust this up a wee bit. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain compression to duck the reverb to maintain clarity with this vocal. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. And then again, just, mess about with the attack and release until you're happy with it. If you want to make it a bit more grabby. So what we're going to do with this vocal track here is we are going to apply a whole ton of reverb, and then we're going to use some sidechain. Oh, okay. Tony says, I apologize. You answered when I was taking a tinkle. Fair enough. No problem. All right. So play with that to your heart's content and find a bunch of settings that you like. So I hope that helps there, Tony and Mark as well. Dwayne is here. He says, I made it. Yes, you are awesome. I'm glad you're here, Dwayne. I know sometimes it can be a wee bit of a difficulty for you to get here, but you are here, which is fantastic. All right, do we have any other questions? Because we are at the halfway point in the show, and it'd be great if we could get some more of your just general Studio One and recording, mixing, mastering questions, if you have any. That would be pretty cool. We've got, we peaked at 21. We're down at about 18 just now. It'd be nice if we get some more people in here, but it is Memorial Weekend. I get that. So, we're probably going to have a smaller audience because of that. Some folks are going to be away with family for the weekend because it's Memorial Weekend. And I know it's a public holiday for you guys in the United States for Monday. So, and actually, it is a public holiday here as well in Scotland, but for a completely different reason. It's just a public holiday. Cleon is here. Hello, Cleon. Good to see you. Welcome. I hope you've had a good week. Let's see. Lorenz is also here. Awesome. He is waving. So that's great. Most of the regular folks are here, including Rich Cresswell. He is here. Tony says, do I have to wait till Wednesday if I have a question about chord notation? Yes. I'm trying to make the separation between Songwriting Simplified on Wednesdays and Sunday Night Live a little bit more clear. So questions about songwriting, composing, arranging, notation, music theory, those are really for Wednesday's show. And then general Studio One, mixing, mastering, recording, and that kind of thing are for Sunday Night Live. All right, so Wednesday, songwriting and stuff to do with that. Sundays is to do with Studio One issues. So if you have issues with Studio One or mixing tips or that kind of stuff, you've got questions on how to use a compressor, how to use EQ, stuff like I've just done here, side-chaining effects, for example. Those are all kind of legit Sunday Night Live questions and, stuff related to that. Hey, Tony, you're not being a pain in the ass. It's cool. It's absolutely fine. And you know what, Tony? If you really think I cannot sit on this question any longer, I have to get it out. I have to get it out of my head, out of my mind, out of my soul. We can do that. Go to the website address down at the bottom of the screen there, jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Right? When you're there, in fact, I can show you exactly what you need to do. Okay? So we're going to go over to here. Here's the website, jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Just click on this button here, and you'll go all the way down to the bottom. Type in your name, type in your email address, and stick your question in here. And you can be as detailed as you want. You're not limited to the 200 characters like you are in the chat. So if you've got a lot of detail to your question, then get that in here and then hit send. And what that does is that sends me an email. And I will then read your email. And if there's an example that I need to prepare to be able to answer your question, I can do that in advance. If it's that kind of a question, if it's a lot of detail to it, we can do that. That is absolutely fine. All right. So if that's what you require, that's what we can do. All right, folks, any other questions? You guys are being hilarious about some kind of drone. That's just too funny. Tony says, I'm becoming suicidal. Please don't do that. Please don't become suicidal. It's really not worth that much, I'm sure. Drop me an email and I will check your email out. And if I can just answer it with text, I will email you back and give you a detailed response. Or we can make a video out of it, or we can, kind of dedicate the first section of Wednesday's show to your question. Okay? I can do either of those. All of those options are available to you. So drop me an email, Tony. And I really do hope you're not being serious about the whole suicidal thing. You're talking about chord notation. You know what? It's not the end of the world if you don't quite know how to orchestrate or voice a particular chord. It's not going to hurt too terribly much. Okay, no problem, Tony. You go take care of yourself, man. You go take care of yourself. And you don't need to apologize. You really don't. Okay? It's absolutely fine. I will gladly answer your question. Just drop me an email, mate. Okay? I'll happily take care of it for you. All right, go take care of yourself, Tony. And I hope you have a much better day tomorrow. But yeah, drop me an email. I'll gladly help you out. Happy to do that for you. And also, I am happy to do that for anybody else here, okay? If you have a much more detailed question that you think, you know what, I can't possibly ask this question in 200 characters, which is what you're limited to by the chat here in the live stream, then drop me an email. Do exactly what I've directed Tony to do. Drop me the email. And if I've got a bunch of emails, then we'll just do a few email questions at the start of the show, either on Wednesday or Sunday, depending upon, kind of which kind of a question it is. So Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to email me. Okay? I'm here for you guys. That's what I do. I'm here for you. So, you know, if you've got a burning question and it's going to take you more, you know, than the 200 characters to ask the question, or you want to give me screenshots to go with your question, or you want to make a short video to illustrate an issue, then yeah, by all means, do that. Send me an email, because you're not going to be able to do that in chat, and that's absolutely fine. Just, you know, just let me know, hey, I've emailed you, and that's cool. We can do it that way. Peter Brooks is here. He says, want pizza. Yeah, I want pizza as well, actually. I had a roast, a nice Sunday roast for my dinner. And people are dropping out like flies here. We're down to 13 people. Having peaked at 20 people. So, let's see. If there are no more questions, I guess we'll finish the show early. I don't like to finish the show early. I like to run for the full hour. But people are just dropping off at the moment. So maybe that's what we'll do. If there's no other questions in the chat. Let's see. Yeah, I am not seeing any other questions. And I'm having a good look all the way up the chat just to make sure I've not missed anything. Let's see, is there anything that I have missed at the start? Nope, I don't think I have missed anything. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and we've got only about 14 people here. We did peak at 21, which is not bad. You know, it is Memorial Weekend. I totally understand. And you know, folks will want to spend time with their families, especially as you know it's a public holiday on Monday. So you know, you guys want to go off and enjoy yourselves with your families. So I will let you all go, and I'll let you all go and do that, and we'll just end the show early. But we'll be back on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. So if songwriting is your thing, arranging is your thing, composing is your thing, and you use Studio One to do all of that, or you are wanting to explore Notion to do that, then Wednesday's show will be the place for you to go. And it's the same time, it's 6 p.m. Central Time. So we'll be back here on Wednesday. But otherwise, folks, have a wonderful extended weekend, and I'll see you all on Wednesday. Good night, everybody.